Okay, so let's stick on a. Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and today I'm talking with Mike Garrison about the 2 fears holding back your sales. Before we get into that, Mike, why don't you tell people where they can get hold of you?
The best place to get a hold of me, if you want to be successful in the future, is on social. So you get me at Twitter at Mike Social Sell, or look up Mike Garrison on LinkedIn. Instagram, I'm Mike G. Roanoke. If you're old school and you want to lag in performance, you can look at my website, valuesbasedmindset.com. But really, website, really? Just connect with me, talk to me.
But they can find you on social.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So we're talking about the 2 fears that are basically holding back your sales. So why is it that you focus on that and on this particular subject area?
Well, long story short, this guy Tim Kite, who is a
great and by the way, hello to your mum. Hi.
Hey. Yeah, no kidding.
What's your
right?
mum's name? We'll give a shout out.
Dawn Center.
Dawn, good to see you.
Yeah, the long suffering. She's very, very.
She's
gracious.
not allowed to put any comments in because
That's right.
It's knocked out and stuff.
Actually not. But no, I saw a speaker talk a long time ago. I was a professional coach at the time, a consultant, called E plus R equals O, which is events plus your response is what actually creates the outcome. And the only thing that you have control over is how you respond. You can't control the events, right, and you can only influence the outcome. And that for about 10 years, I marinated on that, Tim, and thought about it. And then I started thinking about maybe the secret to having high performers in sales actually perform well is to investigate why they already aren't, as opposed to some new idea or new technique.
Okay.
And that's where it came out of. And the second you start looking at why people aren't successful at sales, if you break it down, the Socratic method, if you break it all the way down, it comes down to fear every single time.
What, scared to contact people, or scared to post something, or scared to go?
Literally, I was talking to a who manages financial advisors, and he's a very guy in Virginia, and he's got a guy that he's going to be probably letting go today or tomorrow, who literally wouldn't even, now they were telling him to go cold call, right? But he's a martial artist and a financial advisor, and he wasn't able to get out of his car in the parking lot and walk into a martial arts studio and introduce himself. That's how afraid he was, right? And so this fear is real. But when you break it down, there's 2. Fear of death.
So
fear of death and fear of isolation.
Yes. And one of the things that, yep.
Yeah, fear of death and isolation. So I guess the way I'd say it is, it in general, it applies 2 different ways for individuals and organizations. So for individuals, the fear of death in general makes us impatient.
Right.
Right. We have this either conscious or subconscious realization we have an expiration date. And so if we're not intentional, if we don't choose our response through preparation, strategy, and training, we can be very impatient and make mistakes.
Yes.
Isolation is we don't want to stick out. We were running around in like leopard, like skins and trying to invent fire and things like that. It was not very safe to be on your own. And so we have this primal fear of being alone. And so in sales, this affects individuals and organizations in lagging, like they're afraid to give up cold calling or emailing, for example, even though they hate when it's done to them.
Yes.
They never buy that way, but they're so afraid of being out in. And so instead of looking at that as an opportunity to win, use it as an excuse to lose.
From West, which I agree with. I'd be afraid of messing with anybody with a black belt. Very true. We actually one client who had somebody who worked for them he was a black belt 5 dan at martial arts. And when it came to asking him to do stuff, that you didn't go up to him and sort of like slap him for sure.
That's the joke I made. I said maybe he's afraid of, the reality is number one, he was a borderline candidate because he doesn't have a lot of resilience. Right. And then, I made the point to my client that this guy wouldn't be successful on social selling either.
Right.
Because don't we run into the same problems? Oh my God, I can't do that. Or I would, I
wouldn't go on a podcast or,
Yeah, these two fears, and for organizations, there are. This is important for organizations. You're made up of people in a sales environment, or a salesperson that really wants to move to the next level. You've got to address these issues. You've got to face your concept of mortality, and you have to face your concept of innovation. Right? Social selling, it's not like 5 years ago when you and I were talking on a podcast and you had just published your book, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's already done and dusted, right? The research is there. Everyone's talking about it. And yet most of the people that are talking about social selling aren't doing it.
Yeah, so there's some research that was done on dogs. This is years ago. They don't do research on dogs anymore. So just to assure people that no dogs have been hurt in this podcast. The story about Pavlov's dogs, which is where you rang a bell, and the dogs immediately thought they were going to be given food. So when you rang the bell, and then when you started ringing the bell, there was an automatic response. And what they started doing was actually making the dogs go through certain an assault course. And if there was a particular assault course where they got, for example, they were being electrocuted, they would actually lie down and give up. And it's the similar thing around resilience that you talk about, around the same with humans. This psychiatrist actually went and started working with cold calling teams, because what happens is if you get rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection, you give up.
Every time. What's really interesting is, and you and I have talked about this, the new assessments that I find very valuable are ones that don't wait. That we use in the sales industries. We were very driven people, very aggressive people, very competitive people. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not the key. Mental toughness is the key. No.
Right.
Drive will get you through. Drive's kind of like willpower. Like, you ever worked out really hard, new year, going to the gym. Your drive is not actually what makes you successful. It helps you get started, but it doesn't sustain. And I'm sure in Oracle, everything was easy. You never had any problems. It was super easy selling, right?
I wouldn't have put it like that.
Wait, so resilience, mental toughness, like your ability to believe that it's going to work out, that's not drive. Drive is your ability to be intense, to apply things like that. And it's good, don't get me wrong, but every time I talk to sales leaders, they're not thinking about fear. right?
Right.
So if you understand that fear is what holds most people back in sales, to find we don't know of any people that are trying to all of a sudden fill a empty pipeline in 1 month, right?
No, of course not.
You know, well, I don't want to do a 12-week program. I need to fill my pipeline now. And it's like, well, actually, what you need to do is you need to build a foundation of a pipeline you can trust. And the only way you can trust it is if you build it right. And so this is that problem with the hyper-competitive drive. And you see it in the big firms. You see it in business development and financial services and stuff like that. You certainly see it in copiers and other things.
This is where you basically, I need it and I need it now.
Right, which is why they're not mentally resilient. Like they're driven, and so they bust their hump really hard for a couple of weeks or a month, and maybe they get a couple of deals. But here's what happens: you and I both know, because we're men of a certain age, salespeople of a certain age, that you've got to be able to sustain. You have to be consistent.
Yes. For
a year and a half, or 2 years, and I think that, and you've talked to sales leaders all the time too, Tim.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh, they didn't try hard enough. They weren't driven. I need more people to drive. And I'm like, actually, no. What you need is people that aren't going to quit. People that are going to have enough mental toughness to, even if you've got a crap sales methodology like cold calling all the time, right? You're going to be, okay, with the fact that you don't automatically become a great sales. They're able, because they're resilient, to deal with the fear. I had a conversation with the same sales manager, and I asked him this. I go, when are your people failing? And I like to ask really nice questions like that. And clients of mine go like, and he goes, well, they're failing at work. I go, incorrect. Like you have control to a certain amount of their mindset and how they operate at work, but they're losing when they leave the office. And they're intentional about mindset. They're surrounded by all these distractions, all these, like everybody always glamorizes sales, right? And talks about how selling is the most honorable profession. And like we talk about the salespeople in church and we bring them up front to no, right? And so they leave the office. Yeah. And fear hits.
Right.
Then when they come back to the office, they're afraid already, and it just cascades.
Right. And why is it that we're not talking about this in terms of the fear of death, the fear of isolation, and what is it? Is it because it's on macho, or is it what is it?
I think macho, this faux macho, faux tough guy stuff out there, because most organizations don't care about their people.
Right.
And that's if you care about your people, you're going to measure on the long run, you're going to invest in them, you're going to build them. And when you've got a people focus, I always think of Scott McGregor. Scott McGregor is the talent champion council guy, and he's amazing. He's like, people over everything. That's his saying.
Is that because in sales what happens is that we generally see people as being expendable. So if you're not going to do it, I'm going to get somebody else in. And it's that sort of I don't know if you've seen the Boiler Room film where if you don't want a Ferrari, you can leave now type conversation.
Glenn Robbie, coffee is for closers.
I mean, West has made a great point, which actually he said it actually even before you said it's all about the team, and it's like cultivating a love of selling in the team. Yeah. Thanks, West, anyway, for being there. Thank you.
Yeah, that's huge. Well, I would say that the root problem is not that you think your team is expendable. It's that you really don't care about your clients. Right. If you really care about your clients, you're going to invest in your entire team. And a lot of times, sales thing that when in reality, you know this, you taught me this. we have to integrate the entire workforce on social. We have to connect everyone, because number one, then you don't want your sales team to feel isolated from your entire staff.
Yeah.
So we can address that fear of isolation in sales by not isolating them, by making them an integral part. And then we can address the fear of death by really caring about client retention. And I just got to let people know, like, unless you're selling transactional products, if you're selling a service or you're in anything where you have to talk to human beings, like, your real profit is going to come from retention. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, we know math as sales leaders and business owners, Tim, but we only want to apply that math to our clients, not to ourselves.
Yes. And I think there is a fundamental difference between selling something which is transactional. My partner's son, he doesn't. One of his sons doesn't do it anymore. But it was a low cost. He was selling a low cost piece of products to not CMOs, but the next level down. So it actually didn't need a lot of sign off. So it was kind of one of those things where you ring somebody up, do you want to buy it? Have you got your credit card number? Type transaction, rather than actually having long sales cycles.
Totally. My not challenge to that, Tim, but my counterpoint would be shoes are pretty transactional.
Yes, they are. Shoes are pretty transactional. The difference being is that in business to business, you tend to know the name of your salesperson, whereas when you buy a pair of shoes, you probably don't know the name of that person.
Well, Zappos, very transactional, web-based shoe sales. They invested in their team.
Yes.
Right. And so, because sales isn't all, like, when you, like, I'm really working hard to get inroads with CPA firms and attorney firms, because they don't like thinking themselves as salespeople. So they have, their salespeople are called business development.
Yes.
Right. Right. Which is a salesperson, but the boiler room all the time. Sales is the entire process to delivering the product, doing good follow-up service. It's the entire shooting ball of wax. And Zappos won because they're like, all right, well, we can't afford to call people to sell them shoes. However, we can make sure that we have designed the experience of buying to be so low risk and so convenient, so fun, that we're going to dominate the market. And they did. And that would be my encouragement, is approaching fear from an organizational perspective or an individual sales perspective on one aspect of the sales process. Instead, look at the entire process, ask yourself, well, where am I having problems? Right? And so if you're like me and you're kind of fast-paced, I have to really focus on after-sale service and delivery, right? So I build my team, I build my systems, and invest more time on making sure that I'm excellent there.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Sorry? So Mike, why do you think people's emotions are stopping them?
Emotions?
Yeah.
Mainly because they respond to fear passively,
right,
unintentionally, right? And so everybody talks about mindset. I am not the most intelligent person. I'm not a psychologist, but I know one. I know a psychologist. I'm talking to him today about social selling, by the way. think what you should do is you do some business with yourself.
Oh, yes.
And ask yourself, how and why am I responding the way I am? And is that response, is that what I want it to be? Like that young man that couldn't get out of the car yesterday. My question to him would be, how did it feel to not be able to get out of the car?
I have a friend who does secret shopper work, and it's quite interesting the results they get when they ring up people and try and buy stuff.
It's crazy. Like, but that would be my thing, is like, this coach or a consultant can really help decrease the gap between realization and performance, right? Because it's one thing to understand what we're talking about right now, Tim. It's another thing to design a strategy. That was for Eric, by the way. That was for our friend Eric Doyle. Every time I use the word strategy, I think of Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, man. How's Scotland, baby? But, you know, it's one thing to have realization. It's another thing to execute. And so this is where a coach or a consultant, self-serving, can really narrow that, skip any steps, but speed up the process.
Jonathan makes a great point here. I've been sitting on it because I wanted to make sure it came in at the right point. I've noticed there's no accountability with salespeople except what we can enforce through the product or service we purchase, versus a doctor that can be sued, or a retail store where a product can be returned. This undermines the integrity. That's a really good point, Jonathan. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, Lynchburg? That's my friend Jonathan. He's a really amazing chef, cleverly disguised as a real estate agent.
Right.
Right. He's amazing. But it's different. Like in financial services, ability. Right. CPAs and attorneys, like regulated industries, yeah, where you have professional.
It's regulated.
Yeah. Versus like when I sold copiers, no, the only accountability I had was to my boss.
You just sold it and rode off into the sunset.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, because like if you design the compensation around fear of death, meaning impatience. So if your compensation is all about upfront commission, you're playing into that primal fear of I don't have enough time. And so your salespeople are going to be psychologically set up to make sure, in my opinion, you should always consider your compensation model when you're looking at what behavior you want in your salespeople.
And I think this comes about where I wrote an article recently, didn't I, about the fact there's only 200 days to actually, maybe even 210 days, but mostly 200 days to actually to make your number. That
Folks, you have to search for that. That is one of the best articles. Like, if you are wondering why social selling is something you should consider, that's it. So I'm right. I did the post today about what's your mindset about prospects. It's really all about how are you dealing with fear? Like, do you understand how to leverage time effectively, right? And it's kind of like you have to have a blend of impatience and patience all at once, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the things that I think one of the things that has happened in the pandemic is actually we've had to learn how to manage ourselves, because what's happened during the factory system was that we arrived at an office at a particular time. We knew what we had to do. We had to sit at our desks, and then we would leave at a particular time, probably 5 minutes after our boss left, to make it look like that we were working late. And now what we're doing is that we're working from home. But the bosses don't have the levers to see whether you're working or not. And a lot of people say to me, I don't have time for this. Well, I think there's 84,000 seconds in a day. Time we have, it's priority we don't have.
I think so. Time, and I hit that all the time, pun intended, when I'm trying to explain what we do at DLA. I don't have enough time, and I'm like, okay, well, like, here's the thing. How are you prioritizing? How are you arranging your time? And it is of what you've always talked about and what we teach and it's quite frankly, it's how I coached before. Strategy is what determines the use of time. So if you aren't strategic, if you don't have a plan, if you don't trust that if you do certain things at certain times in certain ways that you're going to get a result, you're going to surrender to fear. And we see this all the time. This is why people go back to cold calling. They know it's not the best way to do it, but they don't understand strategically how to trust talking about. And so,
yes.
Well, I know if I make 200 dials, I might get enough business.
Yes. And you got to remember that cold calling, was around since 1980. It's 40-year-old technology, but people are comfortable with it because they know if I do this, I will get this result, even though the result is poor. At least I know that I get a result. But
it's like traveling salespeople. It's like the tinker that would go from village to village. I mean, the transactional model was you were only able to make sales live in the moment. And that's the problem with this transactional thing. They're so afraid of thinking about influencing thousands of people in one moment because they don't understand it, that they revert back to what they think is safe, which is I'll make a dial, they'll accept it or not, and I'll move on.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people, I get a piece of inbound every day. Every day someone rings up and says, can I buy something?
And where's it go?
And actually, before COVID, it was 3. I used to get 3 a day. So it's had impact on it. But when you say to someone rings up and says, can I buy something every day? You get, what do you mean by that? No. They contact me. 2 hours ago, someone said, I saw your video the other day. Can I buy some social selling training? I need to do it.
And you said yes.
Well, yes. I actually got one of our, but yes, of course. But people just don't. Yes, this happens because what happens is that now people are doing their buying process online. They see you. If they don't see you, you're completely invisible. So they see you. This person is doing a video. Sounds credible. Sounds like a person I could work with. I'll contact them and buy it.
Yeah,
and that happens.
And they're spending real money too. We're not talking about like $1 million.
And I get it every day. Every working day. Sometimes I get it on Saturday and Sunday, but every day I will get a piece of inbound.
So let's talk about the real fear. You ready? Fear of isolation, which is why people don't do social the way you and I are talking about. The reason is Jonathan McKinney had talked about accountability. Well, when you're cold calling, when you're doing transactional sales, there is no account. You're dialing till you, so you're just shooting a shotgun in the air and hoping a bird's flying overhead, right? And if you do that enough, if you have enough ammunition, maybe it'll work. But what we're talking about doing isn't for every organization. It could be, but it's really not, because social selling is social. And just like you don't want to be the drunk guy who hits on all the women, including their relatives, at a cocktail party, right? That would be the cold calling person, right? On social, I think that a lot of people, because they don't understand strategic social, because they don't understand, they know that because they only know how to sell transactionally, they inherently are afraid that they'll be called out. Because when you really start doing what we're talking about, if you don't value your client's time, if you don't respect them, if you don't value your people, you will be called out. You will be noticed and you'll get hurt. So I'm just saying that, like, you can't be in between. You can't be transactional over here. You can't be a functional social. You can't be a functional alcoholic. Like, you got to be clean and sober.
Mike, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for the discussion today. it's been, you know, talking about, I'm not hearing anybody else talking about fear of death and fear of isolation as holding salespeople back. And I was really looking forward to it, to hear about your opinion and what you had to say. And it was really insightful. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about it.
I appreciate it. It might be because it's not worth it, but I'm not sure about that.
I think it's, I think sometimes in sales, we don't like to talk about our vulnerabilities, because we like to have this view that we're unstoppable and we're really successful and stuff, and talking about fear and failure. As you know, we never talk. You know, when we win a deal, we win a deal. When we lose a deal, we don't want to talk about it.
Yep, it's kind of like dating. Oh,
thanks, Will. Thanks very much. Thanks for all your comments, Will, and thanks, Jonathan, as well. And thanks again, Mike. Where can people find you?
Find me. My favorite place to interact is LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. LinkedIn, yeah. Mike Garrison. Look for special needs parent Malbec enthusiast. If you see that, you found me.
That's the guy.
That's the guy.
Yeah.
But not that guy.
Oh, yeah, not that guy. Yeah. And thanks,
awesome.
Thanks, Mom, for tuning in.
Absolutely. Good job, Mom. All right. See you,
thanks.
Tim.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.